Howdy, my name is Gordon Lohmeyer. I'm with the Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service. Today, we're going to be joined by Chris Green. Chris recently retired from the Seattle Fire Department, where he spent the last several years of his career leading energy response efforts for Seattle. Today, we're going to talk to you about recharging of electric vehicles and e-stops or emergency shutoffs. So I'm very excited, and I know Chris is too, to bring you this information. So we'll start this topic in just a second. Thank you. So Chris and I had a conversation probably almost a year ago about e-stops or emergency electric vehicle charging system shutoffs. And we both felt this was fairly important, especially when it comes to the safety of the first responder that could potentially respond to one of these emergency situations. So we talked about it and we said there's a couple of places where it could live, NFPA 30A or NFPA 855. It really doesn't matter as long as we get consideration for this type of language to be placed in an NFPA standard. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you. So where do you think we currently stand with this process of e-stops?
So the good news is that e-stops, since 1984, they've been in place because of the development of NFPA 30A for traditional refueling stations. So right now in the US, you got about 128,000 refueling stations, every one of them NFPA 30A compliant with e-stops. And that's the good news. The good news is, despite the fact that we've had service stations since about 1904, and we had a series of unfortunate disasters that were driven by fuel that couldn't be controlled all the way through the 70s. By 1984, we had coalesced and harmonized around a document, NFPA 30A. And the beauty of that is that it did make it a lot easier and more predictable, which I think is the best part, is it made it predictable. You got a standard now, what the device needs to look like, where it needs to be, where it needs to be located. That was largely put in place in 1984. And so now we've got two generations of first responders, law enforcement, fire department, service attendants, that know that that button is going to be there and they understand what it will do. It's readily available and visible. The code says the device can't be closer than 10 feet to the hazard because you don't want to have to go to the hazard and touch it. Correction, it's 20 feet. Can't be more than 20 feet from the hazard. And it can't be more than 100 feet away because you don't want to have to go too far. It has to be readily visible from the hazard itself. And what that did was that meant it can't be in the back of the service station behind a box of, eggs or whatever else, something where it would be hard to see. The other thing is, the thing they put in there is that if the service station was large enough and there were enough pumps where those distances couldn't be adhered to, you had to put in multiple e-stops and they had to be interconnected. So if you pop one, it temporarily shuts down all of them. So the power of 30A, I mean, that was a very well-written document. And what's interesting is that in the origins section of that document, they defined the scope of what the document was supposed to do very well as the boundaries of influence. And that's where they list where this stuff needs to be. And one of the things they list in there in the boundaries of influence for this e-stop is alternative fuels. It's right there in black and white. And what's interesting is back in 1984 or 83, when they were developing this, they may not have seen this evolution of EVs, but they knew that there would be a transition. They knew even back then, 40 years ago, they knew there'd be a transition. And it showed incredible forecasting by this group to put the term alternative fuels in there. And that is what EVs are today. They take an alternative fuel, which is electricity. They take kilowatts. That's what they take. Now, the rub with the way the e-stop decisions are being made right now is that the most of these the charging stations are governed by NFPA 70. That's the electrical code, and it makes sense to a certain extent. Um, where the e-stop would be, I believe, would be defined in 30A, but you could point to it from 70, or you could point to it from 855. They do that in the code where they point back to a different reference point where it's defined. That's where you define the boundaries, interconnection, visibility, continuity of the way it looks. I think what's important to remember is that, I mean, when we wash away all the conversation, I can tell you I teach all over the country, and I've never come across a firefighter that did not believe that these e-stops were going to be in place at level 3 DCFC charging stations. And for clarity, level 3 DCFC charging stations, direct current fast chargers, those things are going to have a voltage capacity of somewhere between 400 volts DC and 1,000 volts DC. Now, that also may climb as high as 1,500 volts DC. Like, as we evolve in this, as we progress, we never asked our fire crews to go work in an environment where there was that sort of power that they could not definitively control and isolate. That is what we're asking them to do now. And across the country, I don't know a single firefighter that doesn't expect these things to be in place and doesn't want them to be in place. When I ask them, what do you do if it's not there? Do you trust that it's not going to be energized? Do you trust that this thing is going to be safe? What are your visual indicators that anything has gotten safer? Say there's a fire while somebody's plugged in and charging, and there really aren't any. And let's be clear, there's no real visual indicators when you pop an e-stop at a traditional refueling station, but it's about trust. It's about 40 years of knowing that it's going to be there. I've had 2 service station fires in my career. Both of them were driven by, cars that were driven into the pumps. Not knowing anything about all of the mechanics behind this until later in my career, we all knew rolling in that somebody's job was going to be to make sure that e-stop was popped. And in each of the occasions, it was the service attendant that did it. And that was good. We were glad to have that done. And when we think about service stations, refueling stations, the difference, the general public's experience, the fire department's experience with this platform of refueling vehicles, there is no real difference between refueling your EV and refueling your 71 Camaro. There's no difference. We pull up to a pump, we plug it into the side of the vehicle, and we wait for it to fill up. The day will come when you'll be rolling into an AM/PM, and that's where you'll fuel up. You'll plug in your EV and you'll go inside and get some food, get all the trappings that are probably going to put me in an early grave, like orange flavored cupcakes and all that garbage I've eaten for too long. That's the reality. And now what we're finding is we're seeing level 3 DCFC charging stations co-located with refueling stations. Mm-hmm. Now the refueling stations and those pumps, they have to meet 30A for our safety. The DCFCs do not. So when you pop that e-stop because you have a fire or whatever else at that refueling station, it does nothing to the charging stations. And if you decide, Gordon, that I want to try to secure the energy for this charging station because I have a fire, I know it's a level 3 charging stations, I have a rescue, I have a fire, it's plugged into the side of the vehicle, I want to try to secure this power, and you're lucky enough to locate the big metal lockers, they will be locked, they will not be identified, and you'll have to open them up. And even if it is labeled disconnect, all those things that you have to do just to get to that disconnect, why can't we just put an e-stop on the outside? Why are we redefining something that the fire department is so familiar with? Why would we decide now that I want something different to do the same thing that we've done for 40 years? It's just not something I really support. And Gordon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. For me, this has been a soapbox for a couple of years now. I wrote an article for Fire Engineering along with Chris Pfaff in November, and there's been a lot of response to it. Most of the response has been they can't believe that these devices aren't going to be in. So, what are your thoughts on this, Gordon?
You know, I'm right there with you. So if you think about the three different charging strategies, so a level one charger, alternating current, it plugs into the wall. It's something that's typically provided when you buy the car. Level two, it steps up a notch, still alternating current, but typically hardwired. But really, the level three that Chris talked about, they're absolutely, speaking from a Texas perspective, these big mega marts where you have the diesel pumps that have DEF at the pumps, and you have 60, 70, 100 gasoline pumps. If you look right across the parking lot, there'll be 40, 50, 60 of these level three charging stations. Direct current, co-located with these gas stations and service stops, designed to fast charge a vehicle in about an hour. So you're looking at 20 hours for a level one, somewhere 2 to 6 hours for a level two. And then you get to the level three, there's some real current traveling through these things. Also, a couple of years ago, a 400 volt car was the high end. Now we have 5, possibly 6 manufacturers that are producing 800 volt cars. So they're bigger, they're more powerful. These level three charging stations, that they'll charge those cars very quickly at a higher electrical rate. So that's the hazard. And like Chris talked about, we have generations of firefighters now that they know that those e-stops live at those service stations. Worst case scenario, you have a vehicle that plows through a service station, you hit that button, you only have a limited amount of fuel that's going to burn before it consumes the energy. Now with these level threes that are, you plug into your car, they're sitting there charging, things go bad, maybe a battery pack goes in the thermal runaway, it's still linked up. And it's not a good situation for our first responders. So, the tentative interim agreement unfortunately didn't pass. It failed by 1 vote, but we're not going to give up because this is something that's important. This is something it's the right thing to do. And our customers, our clients, the response community, they know and they expect when they roll up to energy being transferred to the public, they're looking for this. So we're trying to give that to them. So even though we weren't successful at a national level, really the next question that I want to talk about is grassroots at the local level. How you can control this through the fire marshal's office for new installations. So what do you think, Chris, on if you're the fire marshal, if you're Chris Pfaff, you're a fire marshal, and we're going to build one of these mega, convenience store service stations that also has 50 level 3 recharging stations. What do you think your approach could be at the local level to kind of put the ball back in the first responders' court?
Two different components there, and I'm going to back up just a little bit just so we have some idea of scale, because scale is pretty important with this one. Currently, you have 128,000 traditional refueling stations. This seems like a lot. That covers the nation. The Biden's infrastructure deal that was signed in November of 2021 funds 500,000 level 3 DCFC charging stations to be built out by about 2028. So there's your scale. And charging up at a level 3 DCFC charging station, even when you can get to 80% in say 20 or 30 minutes, it takes time. Like for a gas pump fueling up a car, you're going to move about 3 gallons a minute. There's limiters, I guess is what I'm saying, is there's a limit to the amount of fuel that you can move into a vehicle. And I believe it's around 10 gallons a minute for like a big diesel truck, like a big long haul truck. It does take longer to fuel up an EV. And so they need more of these stations so you don't end up with so many lines. So when you hear about 50 of these charging stations going in, there's a reason for it. They do take a little bit more time. But at the local level, if nationally there isn't support to put these in, you can do this through administrative rulings. The fire marshal can lean in on this heavy, the state fire marshal, and decide that, hey, this is a specific to Texas. We want this done here. And you can do this through code enforcement and code rights for the state of Texas. You don't have to simply wait for the electrical code to compel you to do this. You can do this at the local level. And what I'm hearing is that there are more and more counties out there that are doing just that. But there's nothing like having uniformity at the national level. And if we can't get that, then let's get it at the state level. And this isn't the first time we've been here where nationally there's been disagreement about different issues. This is just the newest one. For me, though, and for the rest of the fire service and first responders out there, this is time sensitive because there's full funding to build these DCFCs out right now. They're funded. Trying to do a retrofit onto these facilities is not what you want to wait for. And we can't, the first responders, the fire service, we really have to get out of the habit of waiting for a disaster or an injury or enough injuries to drive our safety programs. Our barometers can't be, well, we've never had a problem with that, so why would we look at that from a safety standpoint? And in my opinion, that is right where we are with these e-stops. Now, to the industry's credit, there are a lot of fail-safes that are meant to keep you safe. There's a lot of things that are meant to stop energy from flowing that should keep you safe. But I would compare that to all of the fail-safes that are in place for traditional refueling stations. The e-stop isn't the only way that fuel can stop down in an emergency. And some of those fail-safes, they go way back 60, 70 years that they've been in place. The e-stop was there for first responders and for the attendant. That's what was there. Even with all of these other fail-safes that were in place, in 1984, they saw fit to put these things in. So in my opinion, that really does dovetail very closely into what we're doing now. And a lot of the arguments I'm hearing is it creates a false sense of security. You don't know for sure that that's going to shut down the power. I'm not really sure what to do with that argument, because the people I'm hearing it from are people that are never going to pop these buttons. They're people that are never going to risk anything. They are not going to be the first responders. Make no mistake, first responders out there listening, you own the hazard, you own application. It will be your boots on the ground that are doing this, period. Never forget that. I love coalescing between boots on the ground and academia. I think it's very important. But make no mistake, when it comes to injuries and risk, it's on you, the first responder. You will be taking the risk. And again, in 1984, frankly, from a refueling standpoint, our world got a whole heck of a lot safer by putting these things in. One thing we could do, if we want a visual indicator, is we could simply have a light near these recharging stations that when that e-stop is popped, that light either goes off or on, so you have a visual indicator. It's one of the arguments I've heard from the other side saying false sense of security. Well, then let's put in a light and let's train them to that. But don't change the catalyst. When I've had people come in and show me how to shut down these these level 3 charging stations, it's very interesting to see how much effort it takes, even from somebody who knows right where it is. You have to find the cabinet. You have to hope that it's labeled. You have to cut your way into that cabinet. And then you have to look for the shutoff breaker. And my question is always the same. All these things that you're doing, why can't we just put an e-stop on the outside of this thing that we can just push? Why can't we do that? And if you want to address the false sense, then how about putting some sort of a light, a cheap LED that's associated with these charging stations that lets you know whether they're on or they're off. These are, to me, this is something that is I wouldn't say a non-starter, because I want to hear the other side. But I can tell you from a first responder's perspective with nearly 30 years of experience, I know who's going to be there when the hazard happens. And it's not academia. It's going to be first responders. And this is one thing where we have to really push back and say, no, I'm not going to another hospital to see one of my firefighters who's been injured. I'm not going to go talk to a family because they lost somebody and it could have been prevented. And that is what we're talking. We're talking about injuries. We're talking about bad injuries. If something goes wrong at one of these places, and I don't think it's too onerous to put these things in, especially now that they're fully funded. So at the state level, this conversation that's happening around the country, and TEEX is taking this platform of let's get this message out. Again, it's another example of TEEX taking the lead on something, using their academic might to move the needle in the right direction. And the fact that the state of Texas would be interested in this was something that they would look at, that they would understand that the time is now. That again, it shows great forecasting of this issue. And so again, it makes me proud to be working with TEEX on something like this, proud to be on this podcast. And I hope that anybody who's listening, make your way to a level 3 DCFC charging station and just ask yourself, how would I secure that utility? And if you have to do more than one maneuver to do that, you got a problem, right? Because again, your comparable is a traditional refueling station. That's your comparable. So that's I hope that answered that question okay, Gordon.
No, absolutely. And we think Chris has been doing this a long time, probably longer than anybody that I know. They were very proactive. They took a proactive approach in Seattle to put a team in place, a team that was not only equipped, but that was knowledgeable to handle these types of emergencies. The rest of the country were being very reactive to battery electric vehicles, to the micro mobility devices that we're all battling. There's topics inside of topics where we're on the precipice of doing a ton of forcing batteries into thermal runaways and getting some empirical data about polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, VOCs, and heavy metal exposures that the first responders will potentially encounter during the course of their duties. I feel this topic when we talk about e-stops, this is an area that could be a real win nationwide for our first responder communities. And I think it's important. It's not too late. And I think whatever we can do to compel people when they issue building permits, fire marshals, kind of their visibility in this whole process to give the customer, the first responder community, the tools they need to win. And that's kind of what we want to do. We want to set everybody up for success through training, through the tools and the knowledge to make sure that they're successful. And safety is a definite measure of success. So we're in this together. Law enforcement, fire, EMS, and let's not forget about the tow companies. We all have a critical role to play in properly managing this type of energy. And it just happens to be lithium-ion batteries that we're talking about.
Working with TEEX on these sorts of issues, it gives me a lot of faith that using their academic might to move this needle is something we really need.
And Chris, as always, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your expertise in getting out there and spreading the word to keep our brothers and sisters in all lines of response safe, because that's basically what it is. Make our job safer. We want everybody to go home in good a shape as they showed up to work. So thank you, sir.